The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am the host and co-chair of the webinar. My name is Karen Mann, and I have my co-chair with me, Sadita, attending as well. We represent the Human Development and Leadership Division of the American Society for Quality. This is a global division aiming to enrich the personal and professional lives of our members and non-members across the global community. We continuously look for new speakers within the range of our body of knowledge, which can be found in MyASQ HD&L community site. We host monthly webinars. So if you're interested or you know of somebody that is interested, we would be happy to review their application and see if that fits into our book of knowledge. Before we begin the webinar, let me go over some webinar rules. If there is any question or comment, please type under the question tab and we will answer the questions. The webinar will be held for 45 minutes and then we will have 15 minutes blocked for question and answer with our speaker for today. Those who have attended for 40 minutes will receive a 0.1 CEU through an email, which you can save and then use it to claim your credit with ASQ. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to introduce you to our guest speaker for today that you will hear for the next 45 minutes, and it's Michael Gutka. Michael is a senior process engineer for USAA, a $35 billion Fortune 100 financial services providers. USAA employs over 60,000 employees and contractors and supports its members with a broad portfolio of financial product. As a senior process engineer, Michael manages the relationship with internal business functions in USAA, property and casualty insurance operations, and provides the executive leadership team strategic direction regarding the USAA's intelligent automation platforms. In addition, his team serves a consultative role to optimize business process through information technology, including automation anywhere, robotic process automation, and Salesforce.com, and a proprietary business process management platforms. Prior to joining USAA, Michael spent 16 years at FedEx in various management roles where he led programs to improve customer experience, sales efficiency, optimize business process, and maximize shareholder return on investment. His past experience also include leadership roles in operational excellence and sales at United Parcels Service, UPS, Roadway Express, and Serva Corporation, and has served as an adjunct professor at Benedictine, my apologies, Michael, if I pronounced wrong, University in Chicago. Michael received a Bachelor's of Science degree in finance from DePaul University and an MBA degree with concentration in management, information systems, and operation management from the university as well. He has completed post-graduation executive program at Purdue University, Michigan State University, and University of Memphis. In addition, Michael holds active certification as a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt and ASQ Quality Driven Management Expert, PMI's Project Management Professional designation, and is also a Scaled Agile professional. He's a native of Chicago. Michael currently resides in Austin, Texas with his wife and 4 dogs. Michael, your profile is just amazing. So glad to hear you and learn from you in today's. The floor is all yours.
Well, thank you, Karen, and that was a great introduction. I'm looking forward to speaking to everyone today. And so let's kick this off and take a look at what we got in front of us. So today we're going to talk about a number of concepts, some of them off the beaten path, and some of the topics we're going to focus on really speak to the quality improvement engagements that a lot of you are involved in, and being able to look at how we can be more effective with participants and get them engaged in the process more effectively, more energized, and in a roundabout way have better outcomes. So we're going to start this off with a level set with what outcomes do we want to drive improvement initiatives with, what methods to use, and where do we want to look to improve opportunities. We're going to talk about the teacher versus facilitator model, and I'd really like you to dig deep and think to yourself what you have been doing in terms of facilitating quality improvement engagements or Kaizens, and think about how you can improve on that. We're then going to talk about facilitating to a set group to be able to have success with outcomes in mind. We're then going to talk to formulating a success methodology for facilitating quality improvement groups, which would include openers, activities, transitions to activity, a closer, and then transitions to the next topic. Lastly, we want to talk about revisiting and energizing topics that you're reviewing in your quality improvements to better understand if there's low energy in the room. There's some things that you can do to become more effective and inject some energy into the room. So let's talk about quality to level set across the group on the call today. The goal of quality in any process is to reduce process variation and waste while improving customer experience. So think about that. And what I'd like you to think about is that experience that you have every time that you go online and you're ordering something. In the first example I give here, if you've ever had an order that arrived late and it's the wrong product, think about that in the context of quality. The process is inconsistent and doesn't address the customer need, right? Your need specifically. Think about the next example here, consistently receiving an online order, but the order's not accurate. I just had this happen the other day. I ordered from Amazon and the size of the item was not accurate. You know, it's good that I got it on time, but really when you look at it, it did not address my needs, so it creates a new problem. In another example here, your order is received outside of the normal committed time, but the items are accurate. So let's say you were expecting the order to come tomorrow, which is Amazon's latest commit times, and you received it, but you didn't receive it within that committed time. So it was not a bad experience, but it wasn't a great experience. And really in quality, what we strive to achieve is that customer experience that is a cut above and where the process is consistent and addresses what the customer needs. And so think about that online experience with ordering online, getting it exactly the way you wanted, exactly in the time that you wanted it in. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about having that customer experience and being able to improve upon that. So driving process improvements. I always like to think there's 6 quality principles that really drive everything that myself as a quality professional does on a day-to-day basis. And number 1, as I mentioned it, is customers define quality. You know, you want to be able to understand what their needs are and how you can not only meet their needs, but exceed their needs. And so you want to be able to use that as a benchmark for defining quality projects. I also want to be scientific and use facts as the basis of what I'm doing in a quality improvement. So if you're looking at anecdotal evidence that a process may be a certain way, I choose to focus on the facts that drive those types of decisions. I also want to measure the outcomes. When you think about DMAC, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, the one step in that process that usually gets left behind after a project is done is that back-end control. You want to be able to measure what those outcomes look like and be able to control them so that you have a stable process and you can continue that exemplary customer experience. You want to use teamwork. You want to work as a team to achieve those quality objectives and to be able to use the domain knowledge of all of those cross-functional areas to be able to improve. Break those silos down and be able to focus on the improvement right in front of you. What does that outcome look like? And in many cases, that outcome is far greater than one specific silo or domain. It takes multiple areas to solve those types of problems. You want to be able to optimize your business and reduce waste, variation, and standardize where possible. I see this nearly every day in the business that we have, with a lot of variation going on with reporting and in the insurance and financial service regulatory space. You want to be able to standardize reporting. You want to be able to standardize any process that's standardizable to be able to reduce that variation. Makes it far simpler to run the business. And then lastly, nobody is perfect, but we want to be able to look at failures as opportunities to improve. So when you look at those failures and you do your root cause analysis, be able to look at that and understand the why, so that as you put your foot forward on new quality improvements, that you can learn from those previous situations. So where do you look for types of waste and improvement opportunities within your enterprises? I like to break it down into several domains of waste and kind of look at the processes one by one. When you look at informational waste, a lot of people don't think of information as a waste source, but it absolutely can be. So you look at incomplete information and the rework that may require, inaccurate information, potentially obsolete forms that are used that they're being used because that's the way it's always been done. You look at batch processing. You know, in a supply chain environment, just in time is the way to go, but in a lot of cases across multiple industries, batch processing is still the prevalent domain to be able to produce data. Redundant systems, look at that and look at, is there silos that are creating the same sort of data or reports or replicating process? You want to be able to look at that from an informational standpoint. And lastly, unnecessary information. Really identify what type of information you need and then be able to determine if you can move forward and reduce that information. Operational waste, disorganized workplaces, office layout, poor planning, bottlenecks where you have to look at whether there is a standstill or is it a continuous flow of value. Facility layouts and handoffs is another area, whether you're in an industrial organization or for that matter, financial services, looking at how that information is handed off in a efficient way. Change management priorities, unbalanced workload, having team members that are working far more hours than others based on location. Those are areas where you can find ways to balance workload. And then manipulation of the operation. If you're picking something up, putting it down in another location only to be picked up and moved to the original location again, ask yourself why that's happening. When you look at training waste, lack of training, too much training, the work tools not available or readily available, or in the case of running very lean, no backups or cross training available. In some operations, having a backup is the key to having a continuous flow of value. And then just measuring that back end, being able to measure the back end, to have some controls in place to continue the workflow and that continuous stream of value. So I have a question for you all, being quality experts. I think we have a poll here.
Yes, we do. And yeah, the question about the launch. So the question is the slide that Mike was walking us, yeah.
So what is this quality tool that we're looking at right here in front of us?
Them sometime, just a couple of seconds.
Okay.
I won't describe anything, otherwise I'll ruin it. So it can, this was topic 1, sorry, actually, guys. This was about your first initial, we skipped that one, so I'll launch the one about this slide. So what tool is this? Is it an fishbone diagram, a process map, voice of the customer, a SIPOC, supplier input process, output and customer, or an affinity diagram? Seems like this is much easier as I see the voting going pretty fast. Interesting. We have some diversity in responses. So whoever is still considering to vote, please do so. So the slide you just saw from Mike, what does that look like? An Ishikawa diagram, fishbone, process map, a VOC, SIPOC, affinity diagram. Okay, so let's just close this one. We have majority voting. And the results are as follows, which is interesting because we have diverse responses. So we have 28% a process map, 23% an affinity diagram, and then we have following a SIPOC with 19%, voice of the customer 16%, and a fishbone 14%, Mike. Back to you on the slide.
Well, thank you. So this is an affinity diagram. So when you think of affinity, you think of relationships, and relationships are about grouping ideas. And so we want to group those ideas, and in this case, ideas of waste. So when we look at informational, operational, and training types of waste, we want to group those in an affinity diagram. So thank you for participating in that poll. So now that we have kind of a level set of understanding about quality and where this is going, let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about the facilitation piece. I think most of you, if not all of you, have been part of quality action teams or Kaizens or quality improvements. And that's really what we're going to be talking about from this point forward, is how do we engage the participants of those engagements in a better way. And part of that is being able to relate to them in a better way. And in doing so, you don't want to just be teaching, you want to be facilitating those participants and have it really centered on them. Because if you think about it, the rich feedback and the rich experience you're going to get is from the participants that are working on improving a particular process or feature or a program. And so let's level set on the definition. A teacher is a person or thing that imparts knowledge or instructs as to how to do something, right? We've all been through school and we've had teachers. What you really want to do is differentiate yourself and be a facilitator, someone or something that facilitates something, especially who helps bring about an outcome, such as learning, productivity, communication, by providing indirect or unobtrusive assistance, guidance, or supervision. So facilitation is really about bringing about change through the participants. An example of that, the workshop's facilitator kept the discussion flowing. We've all been a part of those workshops where things really clicked and things were going well and a lot of progress was being made. And I'd venture to say in most cases, those facilitators kind of step back and let the participants really guide that conversation to successful resolution. And so that's what we're talking about. So let's take a look at the steps to effectively facilitating an activity.
Mike, before we jump into this one, would you like to, I think you had a really interesting question or poll out there.
Sure.
About, would you like to try that out?
Absolutely.
So you had one which was very interesting to me as well. The question is, and I just launched it, how many times does an adult learner need to see something in a week to commit it to a memory, basically? What do you guys think? So is it 1 time, twice, 3 times, 4 times, or more than 5 times? So how many times we as facilitators as well kind of need to send reminders or make sure that they see something so they can commit to it? I responded it myself as well before when you sent us a presentation, so I was curious to see what other people think as well. Let's see, we have some similarities here. Okay, so about 80% voting, so that's great.
Okay.
And I'll share the results with you as well. Okay, so the majority thinks that it's more than 5 times, so 47%, following with 37% 3 times, 13% 4 times, 3% twice, and 1 time is like practically 0.
Okay. Well, drum roll, and the correct answer is 3 times. Participants need to see the material 3 times to be able to internalize it in their mind, and that's adult learning theory. And it's also kind of that magic number. If you think about this, maybe some of you have watched TV shows like House Hunter, and they always have 3 options. And the reason that there's 3 options because it's an optimal number for people to make decisions with. And that same reasoning goes with learning theory, that people need to see things 3 times to be able to commit it to memory. Just a little piece of advice. So when you start to look at how you're going to set up your facilitation, keep that in mind with how you want the outcome of the event to look. And if you're creating activities to drive those outcomes, you want to be able to reinforce that 3 times. So thank you, Sunita.
No, that's interesting. I just had a train the trainer workshop, and we were told this number 3 as well. So I'm kind of very happy to hear it rolling out there as well. Okay, so we close that one. You can go ahead.
Thank you. So steps to facilitating an activity, there's definitely a flow of how you want to be able to lay out your facilitation so that it puts people's mind at ease and you can assess the direction that your audience is taking, and then you can adjust yourself and take steps to guide that journey so that they're getting the most out of it, and with the outcome in mind, the engagement is producing the optimal results. So let's take a look at that. So first of all, you want to start with a positive attitude. You want to greet your people, the participants, with a lot of energy. You want to be able to assess the audience. So if there's low energy, you want to be able to do things that pick the energy up with the audience. So some of these folks may be stakeholders, some of them may be quality improvement experts, some of them may be leadership. So you really need to get a gauge on what's going on within the engagement that you're trying to facilitate. You want to be able to explain the instructions or conditions of involvement. And I can't state this enough, to be able to clearly articulate instructions becomes an art, because what you're doing is you're giving them the exact instructions that you want them to follow. And by giving them an exact instruction, for example, when I say go, I want you to XXX, what you're telling them is they really need to focus on the activity. And what that does, it blocks out potential mind benders of thinking about the next thing that they're doing at work or what's going on at home. You want them to focus solely on the issue at hand. You want to develop an activity together and let them know what you're going to be doing with the activity that you develop. You want to be able to monitor the group for pace, for the equality of involvement, and who's doing what. So when you're talking about activities within a Kaizen, you're really problem solving, and you want everybody to be able to participate in that problem solving. At the end of the time frame, you want to be able to refocus the group. One of the good ways that I use when I'm facilitating is I have a cowbell, and I ring the cowbell so everybody kind of stands at attention, or they refocus on the issue that we're going to be reviewing. At that point, we want to debrief, we want to discuss what happened during the activity, and you want to be able to have somebody that's either a scribe or being able to dictate what the potential solutions were from that activity that you've developed. Then you want to be able to revise the activity as needed and get feedback. So when you're engaging groups on an ongoing basis, you want to be able to evaluate whether that activity was effective. So we've talked about activities and being able to deliver an activity. Let's talk about the activity itself. An activity has three key areas that you want to focus on. The first one is experience. You want to draw upon the participant's experience. So if you're talking about an accounting workflow, you want to focus on accounting. If you're talking about IT, you want to be able to bring that experience into the activity itself so that it comes to life for them. You want to be able to simulate the work environment. So think of an example with a process map. You want that process map to come to life in an activity, and I can give you a couple ways to do that with, for example, be able to create a messed up process map and have them organize it. So with doing that, what you're doing is you're bringing their workflow right into that activity and getting them focused on what they need to be doing. You also want to bring awareness to the activity to make sure that they can connect what they're doing in the activity to that quality improvement, and connect that quality improvement to the outcome. And I would say in most cases that outcome is a business outcome for those of us in business. And lastly, have sound theory behind developing the activity. As quality improvement experts here, we want to bring Six Sigma and Lean into this. So whether it's using a quality tool in the activity, as I did with the affinity diagram, or if you want to bring in process mapping, those are types of things you want to be able to incorporate from your quality tool bag. So we talked about activities. An activity really begins with an opener. And as we talked about early on, as an agenda, our agenda today was really a roadmap of the journey that we're going through to learn more about facilitating a quality improvement engagement. And so you want to be able to use openers to exemplify what you're trying to accomplish. And so I used a roadmap to open this up, but you can also name some things that get people to start thinking. It will also get them thinking about what they need to be looking at right in front of them with participating in that particular engagement. Post-it process maps is a good opener because it gets people collaborating together. It gets them up. It gets them thinking about what that process really looks like. Asking a rhetorical question. Everybody has an opinion, as they say, and you want to be able to ask a question that there might be differing views. And those differing views, those responses you're going to get, really start to bring to light the color that that process or that function has to be able to improve it. You want to potentially make an outrageous statement. So if I were to say to you, 100,000 people have died from the current virus, that would make you stand up and take notice. And so that's one example, but you can use any level of outrageous statement or unusual statistic to be able to grab their attention and to be able to kind of hold that attention as you work through the activity. You always want to focus on what's going on with the audience. And so that opener needs to be focused on what you're reading from that audience. And if a visual aid is something that you think could spur them to think about the topic in front of them, then that's what you want to do. And you might use a whiteboard to illustrate that opener. I always like to use table leaders. So if you can picture yourself in a conference room and you have tables of people looking to be able to improve a process or improve a program, I like to select a table leader, and you can do that in a myriad of ways. You can say the person with the longest hair at the table. You could say the person with the shortest hair. You can say the person with the shiniest shoes. Whatever you can think of that would differentiate that group. And so as you open your activities, and you may have several activities within a quality improvement, think about how you want to change that up a little bit to get everybody engaged and become a leader and to be able to have them involved within that conversation in that process. So that's really opening those activities. So let's talk about transitioning. And in every opener, you're basically stating what is going to happen, and that's through some sort of activity. But you also want to be able to tie it to another topic and transition to the next thing that's coming on board. You may want to transition to a closer, which we'll talk about shortly. And so you want to be able to verbally state to your participants what that is that you're trying to accomplish, and ask them a question. What was your favorite topic that we talked about? Ask them, what do you think's in it for you? You want to say, is this relevant? And why is it relevant? So those are the types of questions you want to be able to ask your audience to be able to effectively get some feedback and to transition to the next topic or next activity. And that's verbal transition. So let's talk about physical transitioning. And that's really using activities to transition from topics. So what you can do is yourself as a facilitator. You could move across the room. You could have them as the participants change tables based on the topic. You can kind of have a round robin so that everybody is engaged. And keep in mind what I mentioned in the beginning. This is facilitator positioned, but participant engaged activities in facilitation. So you want them up and moving all of the time. You can do a Q&A. You can have someone from each table stand up, and again, based on whatever set criteria you put forth for the table, the person with the shortest hair, you can ask them to stand up. You can use media. You can use silence and be completely silent until everyone is paying attention to you. And believe me, after a minute or two of not talking and having an engaged group, they will start to draw in and figure out what's going on and why are we not engaged anymore. You want to be able to cheer. Loud expression to be able to key to them that there's a transition. You could pick a leader, as I mentioned, have on-time rewards, and I like to use transitions, especially with transitioning for breaks and for lunches. And so you kind of put it out there that if they want to get out 15 minutes early or 20 minutes early, to have everybody be in the room on time when they're coming back for a break or from lunch. It gives them a little bit incentive to be able to focus on them getting out and them focusing. And then you want to be able to brainstorm, work with one another to come up with what that transition looks like. So that's transitioning. So we've talked about opening, we've talked about developing the activity, and we're at the point where we're transitioning with those types of topics and the activities that are generating substantial data and substantial focus that you can put toward solving that outcome. Let's shift gears a little bit and take a look at what successful closers look like. So a closer is something that closes out an idea or an activity and kind of puts an exclamation point on it. And so we want to be able to evoke actions of what you're going to do. So when you create a closer, you want people to be feeling, what is it that I'm going to be able to accomplish in this Kaizen or quality improvement event? And what are the tasks that the takeaways that they currently have? You want to be able to celebrate the learning from the activity or from the discussion that you have. And you want to make sure that that ties together. So it kind of puts a bow on everything that you've done. It's a nice to have, but it also reinforces everything that you did with the opener, the transition, and the activity itself. Okay, so you're probably thinking, well, what does that look like? Let's take a look at some of these closers that I've used that I think are pretty good to be able to exemplify that. Get one and give one. So if you're working in a conference room or a war room or a conference room that that everybody is conducting the Kaizen in, you want to be able to put up posters. You want to display all of your learning and all of your potential ideas on the wall. And with the get one, give one, is you use Post-it notes to potentially post up solutions. In many cases, people have different ideas, and you want to post that Post-it, and in certain categories or certain posters that you have listed, almost like an affinity diagram, and then adjust those so that you all have a better idea of what's going on. You can do a gallery walk. Again, I can't express enough how important it is to have the visuals within the room and all of the brainstorming and all of the ideas on the walls to be able to focus on the work that you've done, and then to do a gallery walk and look at all the work that you've done. And that gallery walk is a reinforcement of all of that work and where you're able to go with the next steps to solving whatever that business problem is that you're trying to solve. High five review, I use this at lunch times in many cases where somebody's walking out of the room. What I'll do is get up right in front of the doorway and I will have them give me a high five as to what was the one takeaway from the activity that we just finished. You could do key concepts, which are really having table pads and assigning topics to each table and have the table work together to not only write down that assignment, but write down their potential solution. And then again, assign a leader or a speaker to be able to convey that to a particular group within the Kaizen or to essentially the entire Kaizen group that you're working with. You could do a one-word whip, and this is having each person at the table stand up and give one word what their takeaway was for that activity. And you can couple that with sit stand. You can have somebody stand up and you can have them do a one-word whip. You can use sit stand for yes or no. How many people felt that was valuable? And you can have them, the people that felt that it was valuable, stand up. You could have people that, you can ask the question the other way. How many people didn't feel that was valuable? Have them stand up, and then you can have a discussion and close that out. One that I really like is soulmates. So in this activity and close, you have people look for the person in the room with the same size. You pair them up, and then they work to come up with what their outcome was of that particular solution. You could have lecture buster cards that each group has to solve for. You could have them journal, and really this is a good way to have them write down what they've learned, and they also have it written down for when they leave the Kaizen or improvement event. They can look back on this and look at it and see what they need to do. Lastly, with closers, PI and ACE, priceless info, item to implement, encourage things to continue. So you throw it out there, we're going to have a PI or an ACE event, and you have them write down the one piece of priceless info, the one item that they want to implement after, and then the one thing they want to continue doing. So in improvements, you want to stop doing some things, and improvements, you want to start doing some things. And these two acronyms kind of cover both of those. So that's closers. One last idea that we have here before we close this out is really revisiting and energizing concepts. And being an effective facilitator, you've got to really understand the energy of your room and understand, did they get it? And are you getting the outcome data that you need to move forward to positively affect change? And in some cases, if you're running in an afternoon, you may not have the energy that is really required to generate those ideas that generate better outcomes. So you want to always re-energize them and find ways to continue the energy in the room. In some cases, it's an activity where you just do it. You don't even tell them. You just jump right into it to get people into the activity and re-engaged. You always want to put it on the participant versus teaching to them as a facilitator. You want to be able to generate activities as an energizer that allow them to be able to practice what they're going to be doing. So develop those types of activities In our space and domain, it's quality tool selection, it's quality methodology, it could be quality skills and being able to apply all of that to the business issue at hand. And it's just keeping the brain and the neurons firing to be able to take it to the next level and to come out of the event with new types of ideas. So revisiting, energizing examples, really to cap this off, you can use affinity diagramming, whiteboarding on the board, the gallery walk or the waste walk of process field trip. If you're working with a Kaizen group and you have access to the process that you're trying to improve, you could take them on a walk, you can walk through documentation and get everybody really focused on the problem at hand. You can use a top 10 list. You can use scavenger hunts to be able to drill down on what the problem is, kind of leading them to some of the key data evidence. They're going to be the ones that really solve these business issues, but you want to be able to facilitate in a way that those ideas come from them, because those are the ideas that are going to stick the best. And then just using some of the quality tools that are out there, Pareto charting, effort benefits, matrixing, really identifying what's the best use of their time, and wall charting, getting them up. The best time to do this is in a afternoon engagement right after somebody's had lunch. You want to be able to get them up and you want to be able to get them energized. So to finalize this, facilitator-led, participant-centered engagement is really about you stepping away but enabling that participation so that you really get your participants to shine and give you their best. So 3 examples here. In example 1, that's really what we're talking about when we say teaching, where the teacher or the moderator is really pushing information to them. In example 2, there's a little bit of interaction with the facilitator, but example 3 is really the focus that you want to get to, where you have participants collaborating with one another, and that's through the activities that you develop, and that's through the interaction and the questions that you have. They're open-ended, they're insightful, and they generate participant engagement. And with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mike. This was really great, and I already have some people who started getting engaged and trying to share their thoughts and questions. So where do we start? We have some comments about the role of facilitator, and we want to clarify, and I'm very happy to share that Mike and I have worked together in the same company. As we know, in corporate world, the roles are not so well defined. It's not that you always end up being a facilitator and that's it. We do have some comments saying a facilitator is a person basically not necessarily getting involved in the work itself, might be a traditional facilitator role, and that's very true. And sometimes, unfortunately, we cannot choose to just be one role. Like I end up being a project manager, a facilitator, a scribe, all at once in the same project. I'm pretty sure you, Mike, had some experiences similar to that. So I guess, is there anything you would want to add in this regard? So we make it clear that it's not just a clear-cut facilitation role.
And Sadita, I think you make a great comment, because you can have a professional facilitator that their sole focus is moderating and facilitating activities. But as a quality improvement expert, you're going to utilize these types of skills in every engagement that you have that is with multiple people. And so these skills that we talked about today, they're good for 5 people, they're good for 10 people, they're good for 20 people. It's really being able to guide that conversation in a meaningful way that you get the most out of the participants' participation.
That's why we have you here. So one of the other questions we have, or a suggestion that they would like to hear about a good icebreaker to get started, especially when the energy is very low all the way at the beginning. Some people not always want to be where they're asked to go. Any experience like that, or any tips?
Sure. Well, it really depends on the audience. If there's low energy, so a good icebreaker is to introduce yourself to, if let's say there's a room of 20, and get to know one item about that individual. And so they have to, you set the topic so that it's one specific area of their life. So whether they played sports activities, what type of cell phone that they have, whether it's Android or whether it's Apple. Get one specific activity that they could focus on, but it's really about generating that collaboration, because you want to get those neurons firing. You want everybody to start working together. And if there's not a lot of energy in the room, that's one of the easiest ways to do that. Just an introduction, and garner one piece of information from that. And you, as the facilitator, set that piece of information so everybody is talking on the same language.
And you're so right there, because even when you had the presentation at the beginning, you had one of the polls we didn't run, which was about which topic would you like to hear most, which is exactly what you are pointing out now. It's like, let's hear at their expectations as well. So if you say and start right straight to the topic, they might not be so much into why are we even here, you know. But when you hear that feedback, at least you know what each person is expecting and what motivates each person. Like what motivates one person doesn't motivate another one. So that as you as a facilitator get more input on what to do, so you don't always have this golden rule unless you know where do they stand, you know. So that icebreaker is really, really helpful. And yes, did I interrupt you?
Not at all. I couldn't agree more. It's really reading your audience and being able to be fast on your feet to be able to direct the conversation. If you see it drifting away from the conversation that needs to take place, it's being able to take action through your activities and through your questions that guides that the feeling of that room back to what the conversation should be, because the end goal is the outcome of the quality engagement, or Kaizen, right? So whatever you need to do to guide that conversation back to the outcome, as a facilitator, that's your job.
And as I've seen many meetings, like usually you get this very high level agenda, sometimes not even an agenda, as you know. So I think the things you mentioned to follow up are really good technique to also do before a meeting, so they know why they're coming there. So they don't need all these, yes, the icebreaker to bring the energy at the common level, but maybe they do need to be prepared ahead of time. What exactly are they going to be talking about? Do they really need to be there? Sometimes we have these huge meetings where not all of them need to be there, honestly. So even the prep work, maybe it's something we need to consider.
So you bring up a great point, Sadita. You mentioned about a meeting that somebody has
A meeting about the meeting.
a meeting about the meeting. And to give you kind of a gauge in what it takes to have a good facilitation layout, for every hour that you're facilitating with a group, plan to spend 10 hours in developing the activity, the opener, the closer, understanding where the direction of that conversation should be going. You're not looking you're not coming up with the answers. It's the participants that are, but you're focusing your sole attention on guiding that conversation in the way that it should flow. So keep that in mind when you're developing a Kaizen, and I would not have a quality improvement event if it wasn't thoroughly planned out, because a meeting for the sake of a meeting, in most cases, there's a lot of waste of time there. That's why if you follow some of these rules of having an opener and having an activity and having a closer and transitioning, all of these are thought-provoking ideas that keep people engaged, that maximize their time, maximize the value of their time, so that you're really focused on solving that problem.
Exactly. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be, it can be a brainstorming, that's a tool, but as long as everybody's aware that this is a brainstorming session, so, and you need to limit that. So we have another comment here, which seems to be a challenge for companies who have had employees for 30 plus years, and they might find these things like a waste of time, basically. I guess in that regard, something else, but it's change management there.
I think if you follow this methodology, you might be surprised.
They don't always need to know it's a methodology behind. From what I've gone through change management stuff, like sometimes I've used tools without telling anybody I'm using a tool. They just guide the discussion that way.
And when you're designing this, you as a facilitator need to know what that methodology is. Your participants do not need to know this. You want to keep them on their toes, so you want to keep them surprised. You want them to be mentally aware of what's going on, what's going to happen next. You want them to be on the edge of their seat. If they know what's going to happen, that's really when boredom sets in and you start to lose some of their attention span. So some of these activities and the methodology that I just talked about is really designed to keep them engaged and to keep them at the edge of their seat, so that they're kind of thinking, okay, what's next? What's next? What are we doing next? And you also want them to create those activities to collaborate with one another, because that's also keeping them to what the program you're trying to solve is all about.
Exactly. Is there any specific, comes as a question, number that you would recommend for a productive session? I guess it depends on what they're going to work on as well, but.
It really depends on what you want to accomplish, the time that you have involved, right? I think in most quality action teams or Kaizens, it's a couple days, right? Where you're looking at solving the problems of the world. And so as a kind of a general rule of thumb, you want to be able to have an opener, an activity, and a closer probably within 45 minutes, so that you're generating multiple activities. You're guiding that conversation on multiple ideas, and it could be longer, it could be shorter, but really about 45 minutes is where you want to spend several minutes, couple minutes on opening it. You want to spend the body of the activity, the time on the activity, and then you want to spend a couple minutes closing it out and ensuring that everybody, that you're taking away from everybody what you had hoped to take away from that, and that everybody has a common understanding.
And another recommendation, which might be a second topic, Mike, if you would like to come back, is what we have gone through while working on digital teams. So we might want to have another topic, as we have 1 minute left, but on conference calls or virtual teams, and you know how that goes. It's a bit tougher, or I guess different as well. So just keep an eye on that item. But so we thank you, first of all, so much for coming back, and it's, as you know, a pleasure to have you as a friend and former co-worker. And I know we've gone through challenges and successes and change management, so I feel every single thing that you just shared with us. I'm very, very grateful, and I think I speak in behalf of everybody who's been attending today. For everybody else, yes, Mike, we're really happy to have you here. So,
well, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm honored to present to you all today. And if you have any further questions and want to get a hold of me, I believe they post this on
yes,
the
we do, actually.
website. And I'm also available on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, perfect. I thought you shared your email, but LinkedIn is where you can follow and get connected with Mike. As you saw, he has tremendous work experience and practical tips to share. We hope to have him back. If you have any other question, you can comment and send us an email. So, but I would like to share with everybody that today's presentation, we had multiple questions about that, will be shared under my ASQ community, as well as this whole webinar is actually recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel sometime this week. Whereas we're also happy to share with you that our next webinar will be on March 11. It's already launched, and we do have the speaker from January meeting, Jamel Lindo, coming back as a request for you to go into the practical aspect of emotional intelligence leader in the industry 4.0. As a part 2, we will be discussing about self-awareness and some practical tips on how to increase self-awareness. So great to have him back. Registration can be done on my ASQ community as usual. To get notification, you can follow us on our LinkedIn page or just on my ASQ. You don't need a membership for that. You can see the events coming. We do have a 1-minute survey, and I really insist and emphasize this because we do take those seriously. We review the surveys, and it's just a 1-minute thing, but for us it's a guide to hear you and see if we need to change anything. For the credits, the ASQ recertification, as Karen mentioned at the very beginning, if you attended 40 minutes at least, I will be sharing an email, a separate email, and you can use that as a PDF and save it and send it to ASQ for claiming your credits. Thank you again for tonight being here with us, and if you have any other ideas, any other needs of topics, please feel free to reach out and suggest those. We look forward to having you back on our next webinar. Thank you, Kieran, and thank you, Mike. Have a good night, everybody.